Hi, I'm Luke Searveld. Welcome to another episode of Meet the Gaffer. Today we're going to talk about two lights, two LED lights that were sent to me by their manufacturers. One is the 300D from Aputure, and then the other one is this Clar light. It's a Luxo Pando, and the number is P120DT. So the Aputure 300, it's been out for, I don't know, more than a year. And I'd certainly heard of the light. People had asked me about it, what did I think? So it was really cool that Aputure said, hey, you mind if we send you a light? Yeah, sure. I love looking at new stuff. But here's the thing. I found two people that could use the Luxo Pando and the 300D in a number of projects. So check this out.
My name is Mary Searveld. I'm a returning student studying graphic design at Kenyatta College, and I randomly decided to try Campus Movie Fest this year.
I'm Victor Colby. I'm a student from Brazil. I'm studying engineering at Kenyatta College, and I like to do movies on the side as well.
And I started thinking, what would I do a movie about if it was going to be social justice, but it had to be under 5 minutes? And I got an idea, and I was just sort of captured. My imagination was on fire. So I was like, I don't know if I could do it, but why don't I ask around, see if anybody else here is interested. And if I can't do my own movie, maybe I can just get in and do a little graphic design for somebody else's movie and just say I participated.
You get a Mac laptop with all the Adobe suite on it. You get cameras and lenses from Panasonic. You get some microphones, and they even give you tech support, and it's everything you should need.
My movie was called Work Ethic, and it was about a girl who finally gets a job that she's been looking for a long time, and it turns out to have some very strange, unforeseen consequences and downsides that turns out to be a satire on prison labor. And that's the twist at the end, like, oh, you thought it was a regular job, but boom, she's in a jumpsuit, and this is actually about prison labor. So was my M. Night Shyamalan Kafka.
So my movie is about a passive-aggressive, police officer who has anger issues and who has no patience for people's annoying insecurities. He also happens to be a puppet. That's the premise.
The only thing I know about film is what I've picked up secondhand from watching you, Dad, do various film endeavors over the years. And I think like once in high school we had to make a movie, but for the most part I have not done a whole lot of film related stuff myself. I think I've been a PA on a few shoots, and I've helped you stage some Christmas programs and readers' theaters, which involves a little bit of directing from the back seat, kind of. But I've never done anything like this. I've never really had to put this much work into producing, editing, gaffing, makeup, prop management, all of that. I have never done anything like this.
I was in charge of writing, from what the ideas we had to making an actual script, then to getting the locations, scheduling the actors, directing, editing, director of photography, special effects. I worked with a friend of mine who was composing the music while we were shooting. And so it can get pretty insane. It's, it sounds fun at the beginning, but then as soon as you're in, it's like, what are we doing? This is so hard. Why would anyone ever do this? But it was great.
My plan as far as lighting was to go to Dad and say, what lights can you afford to let out of your site for the next week or so? And also, what lights can you teach me how to use quickly enough that I can actually do something useful with them? And it turned out that two companies had just recently sent Dad some equipment that he didn't have any specific uses for on his sets coming up, but wanted to have some reason to be able to talk about them. So he said, okay, I'll show you how to use these two lights. One was the Aputure 300D, which is right there. And then we have an LED panel back there. That's the Clar Pando. Can't remember the numbers off the top of my head. And so he taught me how to use both of those. And he also taught Victor how to use both of those. So Victor asked to come over while I was learning how to use the lights and learn at the same time so that we could be more effective working together So I could work on my movie, and Victor and I could both work on Victor's movie, and that was our project for the week.
Carrying the lights around especially proved to be a little exhausting. It was a lot of weight to be just, having everyone involved, all the actors just, carrying it around, many trips back and forth. It was hard, especially at 4 in the morning.
The Aputure 300D was pretty effective in providing just a lot of firepower, so to speak. It was a little tricky to set up the dome. I couldn't quite remember how to do it correctly, but we did figure it out in the end. It was cool because you could, rather than clip gels onto the light or onto the barn doors of the light, it doesn't have any barn doors, but it does have this big dome, light dome, that has a sort of a film on the bottom like a softbox, and then you can just sort of layer gels on top of that film if the dome is like this. So we used that light for a pivotal poker scene in Victor's movie, which was a big hit. And Victor's movie ended up winning Best Production Design. And I feel like that poker scene had a lot to do with it. For Victor's movie, there were 2 outdoor cop car scenes. We got to borrow the campus safety car, and we used the Aputure 300D as fake sunlight because it only comes in colder outdoor sunlight light. And we used that both as extra light to help see the faces inside the car and as a spotlight when it got to be night, just as extra light to allow the camera to even see at all. So for the indoor poker scene, we used the dome to spread the light out, but for the outdoor scenes, we used the Fresnel lens on the end to use it as a spotlight and get more directed brightness. For the most part, we used extension cords because we were shooting indoors for a couple of those scenes, but for the outdoor light scenes, we did use the battery packs, and that was actually surprisingly easy. It just has a long thing that you hook 2 battery things onto, and away you go, you're ready to go. It was also pretty versatile in the sense that I used it on my movie, Work Ethic, indoors, without even doing anything to it. Didn't have the Fresnel on it, didn't have the dome on it. I just bounced it off the wall to add more light to a very dingy looking hallway. So it wasn't directly on anything, so I didn't really need the Fresnel, I didn't need the dome. I just needed to point it at a white wall, and then it shot light down the hallway. The Clar Pando light was really cool because you could change the color. And I don't mean that in a gel sense, I just mean that in a warm to cool. So we could use it to simulate sunlight, or we could use it to simulate an indoor, more tungsten, warm light. And we used that to its fullest, definitely. So when we were outdoors shooting the cop car scenes, it was sunlight. And when we were inside, but trying to simulate light coming in a window, we used it as sunlight as well. Turned all the way up toward the sunlight side. And we also used it indoors to give a warm indoor light to contrast with a kind of dingy factory. And I think we kind of used it halfway between in order to kind of simulate a more industrial fluorescent light for the oppressively industrial, not friendly hallway. But it was cool because you could experiment with both cool and warm light. On my movie, which was a little smaller, we only had me and 2 actors, we were mostly focused on using the Clar Pando, which was a lot easier to get around, I think, because we didn't need the Fresnel, we didn't need the dome, and it could do both colors. So that was a little more effective for us because it fit well.
Lighting has always been, in my mind, the most important aspect of photography. But, after being more hands-on with it, because, as much as there's a lot to learn from it, it still continues to be a lot of trial and error and really an art form. How you're going to be shaping, volume and giving texture to everything and just making it possible for the camera to even see. So it was very insightful to me just to play with it and to see it being played with as we're actually creating something as a group. It just, I feel a lot more comfortable with it now.
I took at least one photography class that was focused on lighting, but that's very different because you get a very long time to set up a single shot in a studio. It's very controlled. So I had at least some experience with paying close attention to how a small change would add a little bit of light or take away a little bit of light to an actor's face. The concept of fill, the concept of using a bounce. But I hadn't really had to do it while somebody was moving before, which added quite a lot of complexity. And I think I appreciate much more now the difficulty of someone moving in a shot. You have to have light on them the whole time, but if you put light where they aren't, it looks like you're lighting empty space for no reason. So that layers of complexity is that's definitely perplexing. And I think I have a better appreciation for that now.
Thanks for watching.
We'll see you again next time.
You want me to get in? Let's work this through right now.
So for the poker scene in Victor's movie Puppet Cop, we had to hide the fact that we were in the administration building of Kenyatta College. And there were, offices and meeting rooms all the way around the edges of the room where we were shooting. And there are, nice little overhead fluorescent lights all around that room. And we're trying to make it look like a seedy, dimly lit, smoky, kind of a backroom atmosphere, which meant we had to take away some light. And we didn't have a ton of time or materials with which to do that, so we got creative. We found a random piece of red felt lying around, which we taped to the ceiling over one of the offending fluorescent lights. And we also had a long black bag that was, it held, I think, the dolly track for the tripod, and we taped that to a window. So I just sort of turned it inside out and stuck it to the window and taped it on there just to block, because someone had left their office light on over the weekend for some reason. I was like, oh man, you're ruining our shot. So we're just gonna black that out. And luckily you can't really tell any of the scenes because we were able to bring up the light on the poker table enough that we could just drop the light sensitivity on the camera and it wouldn't notice the background light nearly as much, which worked out pretty well, I think. It also helped that we had a smoke machine. I feel like both my actors on Work Ethic also learned a lot more about lighting than they had known in the past, because there were only two of them, so I was using them to help cart around stuff and oh, can you adjust this, or can you help me break this down? And I know that one of my actors, Brooke, who plays Josie in the movie, said she really felt like she understood a lot more about lighting than she had in the past. And my other actor, Connie, she said that she really liked one of the lighting scenes we do where she comes out of the shade and the sunlight hits the planes of her face. It makes for a more dramatic shot. So we were all definitely paying more attention to lighting than I think any of us would have before. I did not claim to be a gaffer. I said my dad is a gaffer and might lend me some lights. If anyone else remembers it differently, they're lying to you.